Thank you so much for streaming our latest message from First Baptist Church. Here at FBC, our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. We do that by thinking big, thinking small, thinking in, and thinking out. We hope that this message helps you as you continue to grow in your faith. If you would like to stay connected to FBC, you can visit our website at fbcloyd.ca, look us up on Facebook and Instagram, or download our free mobile app. Now here's the latest from FBC. Enjoy.
I think oftentimes in the church, you don't want to look like you don't have it all together. So it's easy for others to look at these women in the sex industry and say, oh, they're broken. Until I started ministering and working with women, it wasn't until then that I realized that I was broken myself. God showed me that we were created for Him and created for others. And when I was in my career, if you will, I was living for myself. I'm in need of God's grace just as much as the prostitute that I meet Thursday night. I don't think that anybody's brokenness out there could keep them from being whole. I've seen that with women that I sit with every single day. Every single day, the women that are sexually abused and they feel like they have been shattered for the rest of their lives, I've seen God make them whole again.
Welcome here this morning, and from me as well, a happy Daylight Savings Time weekend to you. I'm not sure I'm crazy about Daylight Savings Time weekend this year, because I think I've crossed the threshold. You know you're old when you look at Daylight Savings Time in the fall and think to yourself, yeah, I think I'm going to opt for the extra hour of sleep rather than just another extra hour to goof off. Used to be, you'd look at that extra hour Saturday night, and it was Saturday night, and you just thought, man, this is awesome. Get to go hard when I was your age. Now I'm looking at it going, yeah, no, I'm going sleep. Going with sleep. You know you're old when. Hey, as Ryan already mentioned, we're starting a new series this morning called The End of Me. And some of you might know, have found it, seen it before. It's a series from Kyle Idleman, and we've done some of his series in the past. Most recently, we did The Song, which was a series on the Song of Solomon. And I think we did that just in the spring last year. We also have done a series in the past called Not a Fan. And I don't know if you remember that. I still get people coming up to me and talking about how much that series impacted them. And so you'll be interested to know that, if you don't already at least, that The End of Me is actually Kyle's follow-up series to Not a Fan. And this is the one that he built and has written to kind of follow that series. So as I've had a chance to look through it, I'm excited about it, and I hope that you'll be excited about it as well. And if you haven't experienced it before, well, trust me, I think it's going to be great. And so get ready to dive in. One of the other things, too, is that we're doing this as an all-church series. And so this is what that means is that we do it in our small groups as well. And so what we talk about on Sunday, then we just kind of further develop throughout the week in our small groups. And so if you're not a part of a small group, can I encourage you? Dive in. This is like the perfect time to do it. What we talk about on Sunday morning is what we're going to talk about during the week, so you kind of know where we're going. It's not going to be foreign to you. You're not going to show up and have to navigate something that you know nothing about. You just get to unpack it a little bit further, and that means that we just get to appropriate it even more for ourselves and learn and grow with it. And so that would be awesome. So if you're not in a small group, then call Ryan, get hooked up, call the church office, and we'll connect you. Nothing else. Our place, Tuesday nights at 7:15. You're welcome. Come on down. I can say that because Fran's not here. She'll figure out what to do when you arrive. And we'll make sure that there's enough snack, which, again, I have nothing to do with. So it's safe on that level, too, and it'll be her problem. She'll figure that out. If you don't know how to get to our place, come and talk to me. I'll give you a map. We'll go from there. So anyways, get ready. This is going to be great. Before we dive in, though, we're going to start a little bit differently today. I'm going to pray first, and then I'm going to just talk to you before we actually get into the series. So if you would, just join with me in bow in prayer. Father, this morning, again, we stop and we thank you for this time when we can come and we can focus on you. And this morning, God, I would just ask that wherever we're at, that you would help us to do that. That you would help us to take the events of our lives over the last day, the last week, maybe even the last few moments, and that you would help us to understand our world better, who we are, who you are, and how you relate to us in a new way so that we could be able to become more like you, that you would be able to do for us what you long to do as we open up to you. So to that end, God, would you come and by your Spirit work in our hearts and our minds? Break down the barriers that we put up between you and ourselves and you. Help us to engage with you today and to know you better. And I ask these things all for Jesus' sake, and in his name I pray. Amen. Okay, so this is going to be maybe just a wee bit different. Before we actually get into the series, I want to talk to you about the series, because I think that there is a danger here this morning that as we come to this series that some of us might not engage. If you're in a spot perhaps where you are already at the end of you, where you've come up against something in your life that is bigger than you are, where you've been unable to solve it, fix it, navigate it, well then this series lends itself to right where you're at. It's going to play right into that gap in your world right now. And so, hang in there, stay tuned. There's hope coming. And so maybe you'll just lean in easily today. But for the rest of us, for those that aren't doing poorly, that where things are going well, everything seems to be kosher, cool, awesome. Well, then there's a danger that we come to this series today and we begin to check out, because I'm willing to guess that as you look at the title, The End of Me, or maybe as you look in your bulletin and you see the title, Broken to be Whole, that most of us recoil a little bit at that. That somehow it rubs us the wrong way, cuts against our grain. And that as we listen to that, as we hear that, the hackles on the back of our neck start to go up. What do you mean? The end of me. That's not where I want to start. I want to start with me. And I want to build from there, thank you very much. I'm not here to find out about the end of me. I want you to make me move forward. I want this to be a positive thing for me. So I think there's this danger that as we hear that, then the end of me, not interested. And some of you might be here, maybe even for the first time. Maybe you're just coming to church. Maybe you came as a kid for a while and have been away for a long time. Maybe you've never been. Maybe you've even maybe been here for a couple of weeks already. And you're still just a little hesitant. You're on the fence about all this. You're waiting for the other shoe to fall somehow. And as you hear this series title, you've got an idea of how this is going to go down. You've been around long enough, you're familiar enough with church to think that you've got a clue about how this is going to play out. In your mind, you're thinking, oh yeah, I know how this is going to be. That the pastor's going to get up and say, oh, it can't be all about me. It has to be all about God. And preacher man's going to get up in there and he's going to say, what you need to do, what I need to do, is give up everything in my life that I enjoy. That I've got to get rid of all the things that I think are valuable, that are fun, that are worthwhile, so that I can pray all day. So that I can sing songs all day long about God. And just like I thought, church is all about sucking the fun out of my life. It's about me being broken. And how that I need to abandon everything that I think is decent and just become some sort of a religious nerd. Maybe you're here this morning and you're even a Christian and you're skeptical. You hear that title and it still bothers even you. Yeah, you believe in God. You recognize that you're not perfect. You understand that you need a Savior, and you've claimed Jesus Christ, the Savior of your life. But deep down inside your heart, you're suspicious that church is a buzzkill and God is a killjoy. And so you hold him aloof, not wanting to get too close for fear that that's where it's going to lead. That's where this is all going. Because every time you turn around, it seems like you're being asked to give up stuff. Give up your time. Give up your comfort. Give up your cash. Start and spend it and invest it over here, serving, working, spending it all on other things, other than the things that I prioritize. At the end of the day, you suspect that it's really just going to be about giving it all away until there's nothing left of you, till you actually literally are at the end of me. So the temptation exists there today for us to withdraw and to not engage as we hear this topic, as we think about being broken to be whole. And I want you to know this morning, I get it. But can I encourage you today? Don't do it. Don't pull away. Don't pull back. Don't withdraw. In fact, can I encourage you to lean in? And as much as you might be concerned, as much as you might be worried, lean in and engage with God, because I believe at the end of this rainbow there is a pot of gold that is more valuable, far more valuable than anything else that we know in this life. And here's why I say that this morning. Here's why I'm encouraging you to lean in. It's because I was once, not that very long ago, exactly where you're at. That was me, sitting in the pew with my arms crossed and leaning back, observing. It's true, like as a kid, I came to know God. I placed my trust in Him as my Lord and Savior. But that's as far as I went with it. I knew I had a problem. It wasn't really hard to figure out. As I looked at my life, I knew I wasn't perfect. I screwed up a lot. It was evident. I mean, didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that part out. And it really wasn't that hard to understand that if there was a God out there, well then His standard is perfection. Right? Like, I mean, if anybody's going to be perfect, it would be God. And therefore, that left me with a problem. So I could see that. I'm not perfect. He is perfect. Now I've got a problem. There's an issue. I've got to deal with that. So I made a decision to trust in God to solve that problem, to fix that gap in my life. But that's as far as it went. And as I sat in church and as I listened to these ideas that God talked about for life, these concepts that He was advancing, that He was proposing and encouraging us to follow, I wasn't buying in. Like, what's up with that? The first shall be last. It's better to give than to receive. You know, all these things that, they sounded noble. Sounded all nice. But in my life, that didn't make sense. As I looked around me out there, that's not how the world operated. And so I kind of held it aloof. And for a long time, it just didn't compute. You know, I was good with the 10 Commandments. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. That's awesome. Not a problem there. Kind of makes sense. Be a good person. Live a good life. I get it. Everybody, we should all try and do that. Don't want to be ignorant. Run around like some doofus. But when it came to passages of Scripture, like the Sermon on the Mount, well, honestly, if I put my cards on the table, I wrote it off as philosophical mumbo-jumbo. We read about the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, like Ryan said. We're going to go there this morning. I just want to read to you the first 5 verses. We won't even go into the whole thing. Didn't take me the whole thing before I could check out. First 5 verses. Matthew chapter 5, the Sermon on the Mount. Now, you need to understand, this is where Jesus comes along and he's talking to his disciples, those that are following him, and he's saying, hey, dudes, this is the way life works. This is the real reality. I know what you think about it, but this is the real stuff. When you get to this point, now you're starting to get somewhere. And that's what he's proposing. That's what he's presenting. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? It says, now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. And he said this, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God, or is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And that's as far as I needed to get. It was like, thank you, no thank you. Really? Honestly. That's what this is all about. That's what you've got for me. And if I'm candid, this is kind of how I looked at it. It was a lot like poetry that you have to take in school. You guys might be there now. Maybe you like poetry. Good on you if you do. But for me, you'd get into stuff there, Shakespeare and so on. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? I'd look at that and say, can't you just say what you're talking about? Why do we have to be all airy-fairy and nebulous? And let's just put it out there. What are you saying? This doesn't make sense. And I come to the Sermon on the Mount, and it was the same way. Blessed are they that mourn, for they will be comforted. What are you saying, God, that I should be sad all the time? It just didn't make sense. Until one day it did. And that was at the point that I came to the end of me one day. And I've shared this story before. I won't go into it a whole bunch and bore those of you that have heard it. But it happened, started when my cousin passed away. He was 16. We were both 16. And out of nowhere, within 8 months, he was gone. We'd been like brothers. Then my grandpa, he'd passed away. We'd been close too. And somehow I kind of navigated through those. I was able to kind of just sort of dismiss it. It's a tragedy, whatever. It was an accident. It doesn't make sense. Too bad, but it happened. And I skated through that somehow, but then my dad passed away. And I brought everything that I had to that experience. I brought everything that I had. I tried every which way to figure out how this would make sense. How this was somehow legitimate. That it was somehow acceptable. And I could not make it compute. Not that I thought I was going to save him, not that I thought that he had to survive, but that somehow that this would be okay, that this was acceptable, and I had nothing. I brought everything that I had to the table, and I came up short. All I could figure was that I'm not sufficient to deal with this. I can't deal with this. I can't make this make sense. I can't fix it in my head. I couldn't fix him. Now I can't fix it. I can't rationalize it. I can't somehow bring it together to compute in my mind. I was broken. This world was broken. This is messed up. This is all we got to deal with. This is messed up. We're doomed. This is it. And I got to the end of me where all I had left to do was just mourn. Mourn my insufficiency. Mourn the brokenness of this world around me. Mourn that my dad was gone. And at that point, I turned to God in a whole new way. And I went to Him from that position, not having had enough, not being enough myself. And He showed up. And I was comforted. And I knew Him in a whole new respect, far beyond what I'd ever understood from Him before. And at that moment, in that period of time, it wasn't just a day, but at that time, all of a sudden, Matthew 5, verses 3 and 4 started to make sense to me. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. My pride to that point had pushed me so far away from heaven, so far away from God, that I could only experience Him in the distance, in an abstract, in a theoretical sort of a way, where He made sense in my head somehow, but not in my life, not in who I was, not in my experience. But as I became poor in spirit, as I had nothing in me to navigate and deal with this problem, then He showed up. And I started to understand heaven. I started to understand He and His ways. As I mourned and wandered my way through that wilderness of life, He showed up and comforted me. And became real. He became legit. And it was evident to me that He was operating on a level far deeper, far more significant, far more real than the reality that I had been trying to navigate and build for myself. When I started to find the end of me, I found that my life actually got a whole lot better, a whole lot more significant, a whole lot more meaningful. Now, you may be here this morning, and you're saying, hey, dude, I'm happy for you. That's all great. But that's not where I'm at, just so you know. Things are going all right in my world. I haven't reached the end of me in any way, shape, or form, and it is not in sight. So far, everything I've got facing me, I got by the tail. And when it comes right down to it, me is more than paying the bills. And I hear that. You're doing well. Life is good. And if you'll let me, I want to speak to that too, just a little bit. This morning, again, I don't want to pretend like I'm somebody special, because it's clear that I'm not. I don't breathe the air up there. So that's not my point here. But I have had some pretty neat experiences in my life. There was a time where the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada returned my calls. That was kind of cool. There was a time I had a chance to work in the highest levels of government in Alberta and in politics with some of the mucky mucks. And that was kind of cool. I managed to marry the prettiest woman in the world. And you could tell her that I said that. She's in Kids Quest, working in Kids Quest. Actually, let me say that differently. Would you please tell her I said that? And that was awesome. It's still awesome. And I don't even have to look back that far to see one of the highs in my life. This past summer, I got to go for a ride in a 458 Ferrari Italia. And I don't care who you are. That's the sweetest ride on the planet. It does not get any better than that. Not on four wheels. Not a chance. So that's not to say that I'm some kind of Mr. Wonderful, because you know that I'm not. I know that I'm not. That's just to say that not all of my experiences have been bottoms. And this is what I've learned from the highs of my life. They don't hold a candle to personally knowing and experiencing God in your life, in my life. That as I have seen Him work and show up in my brokenness and in my emptiness, that far surpasses anything that I've been able to experience otherwise. You know, in the end, this is what I think. That as far as our achievements go, as far as the highs of our life go on this level here, they're all basically just an exercise in diminishing returns. That as high as we get, they just continue to erode back to nothing. And in the end, even at our very best, me doesn't really get me very far. It's kind of like this. I'd submit this to you. I think we're all broken, regardless of how well it's going. It's like we've been handed a calculator at birth. And we said, here, take this and do life with it. But some of the sections in the display don't work. And we don't know it. We just get handed that calculator and we start and do the math according to what we see and what we understand and how we want to run the buttons. You've had that, right? You've had one of those calculators where the display starts to go and the nines are supposed to be nines, but they look like a 3. Or the 6s look like 5s. But you don't recognize it because it's giving you an answer. It's giving you a solution to that equation, that problem that you're working on. And you just don't recognize that part of the display doesn't work. So the answer is wrong, and that we can't trust that calculator. But we just keep moving along, pushing forward with that calculator, trying to do the math. We want to be happy. We want to be fulfilled. So we bang away on that thing, trying to add up all the numbers that we can figure out, all the things that go into that equation, and we push equals, and it says a new car. It says a new house. It says a cabin. It says a holiday in Hawaii. And so away we go. That would seem to be the answer. That's where we're going. That's what my calculator says. And so we chase it. And it sort of works for a while, but then it just starts to fade. And pretty soon we're back at it again. Well, that didn't seem to work. That didn't seem to last. So maybe there's a better answer. So we start again, and we start and bang away on the buttons, and we start and add up the numbers differently. And this time the answer comes out, it's a new girlfriend. It's a new wife. It's a new boyfriend. It's a new husband. And then we find that doesn't really solve it either. But on and on we go, calculating. calculating over and over, thinking that my calculator's fine, but never ever seeming to get an answer that works, that lasts. As we start out this series, as well as it's going right now in your life, can I submit to you that your calculator is broken? That you are broken? And that the answers that you're coming up with may be working right now, but one day, and probably sooner than later, they're not. They're going to ring hollow. They're not going to be the solution that you thought that they were going to be. And that we can't today trust me as our calculators. That we would be much wiser, even before we run into an experience that takes us up against the end of ourselves, to consciously choose today to trust Him, to trust God, to do the math of our lives. It seems to me that it would be worth the experiment. That if you're here and you're not sure about God, but if there's even in the back of your mind a hint of a possibility that He exists and that He's real, that you would try and engage with Him to find out what it's all about. And that you would take a step away from all the things that you hold to be true, the way that you hold it to make sense. And that you would engage with Him and try and see if His way makes even more sense. To find out if there might actually be another level of life beyond what we can understand and know from our perspective right now. And really quickly then, this is what I think that we're going to find as we start to do that. As we engage with God, as we choose that decision, or as we find ourselves up against some circumstance in our life that demands that we look at that equation. This is what I think we can anticipate. Number one, that at the end of me is the beginning of trust. At the end of me is the beginning of trust. So long as we hold tight to our sufficiency, which is to say, as long as we hold on to our way of thinking and never consider that maybe there's something different that's better. As long as we hold on to our priorities and goals, which is to say that maybe we don't consider that there might be better ones than the ones that we've come up with. So long as we hold on to our resources and our abilities and place our trust in them, there is no opportunity in our lives for God. And if there's no opportunity in our life for God, then we will never find Him to be faithful, which is, I think, a lot of our problems, particularly as Christians, where your faith doesn't ring true, where it seems hollow and still empty. We need to find God faithful, which means we need to step out and let Him do some math. And when we find Him faithful, then what happens is that our trust grows and we're that much more willing to step out into that world. Isaiah 55 verses 8 and 9 say this, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." He comes straight out and tells us, the way I do it is different than the way that you do it. As far as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. You've got to learn to do your math differently, He's telling us. Take a step out and let Him do some of that math and show you and me, that His math is better. And when we do that, then what happens? Proverbs 3 verses 5 and 6 tell us, when we trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding, and in all of our ways we submit to Him, then He will make our paths straight. He shows up in our world and gives us a whole new paradigm to work with. Far better than anything else that we can come up with on our own. Second thing that we will anticipate as we lean into God, as we come to the end of ourselves and engage with Him, we find out that the end of me is the beginning of a new identity. You and I today are looking for an identity. We want to be somebody, don't we? We want to be of value. We want to be understood as being of worth, don't we? But our problem is that our calculators mess us up on this in how they tell us to go about us. It tells us that our identity is wrapped up in our performance and or our positions. That's where our identity comes. And what that does is it leads us to competition and strife. We start to do some really ugly things as we try and get ahead of that other person, as we try and build ourselves up to be better than the next person, as we measure ourselves against that person that seems to have it all together. And it leads me to be just dissatisfied and broken and frustrated. Our calculators lead us to an insecurity and doubt in who we are and our value and our worth. But when God comes along, when we lean into God, then it's a whole new deal. It's a whole new ballgame. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17 says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone. The new is here." He says, "Let me do it for you because you can't with your calculator. I will make you new. I will give you an identity that works, that's satisfying, that won't lead you into strife, insecurity, doubt, and fear." And that process begins as we put our trust in Him, as He turns us from a non-believer, an enemy of the cross, into one of His family and His followers. But it continues on from there. For those of us that are Christians, 2 Corinthians 3, verse 18, for those of us that already know God, that process isn't completed. It's just begun when we start. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, "And we all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory are being transformed into His image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is in the Spirit." As we allow God to take us further and further in our brokenness, as we come to the end of ourselves more and more, as we recognize our insufficiency day in and day out more clearly, then God changes us, builds us into the image of His Son with ever-increasing glory. What a promise. And there we find an identity that where we're not worried, where we're not broken and beaten and defeated, where we're not doing ugly things, because it's by His grace that He makes us His children, sons and daughters of God. Number 3. Oh dear. I'll go really fast. Number 3. At the end of me is the beginning of God's power. 2 Chronicles 16, verse 9a says, "For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him." Right now, God is looking down at us, and He is looking for someone on whose behalf He can show Himself mighty, which is to say that He's looking for us to admit our brokenness, to give up on our own ability and say, "God, please, I'm at the end. There's nothing more that I can bring to this equation, nothing more that I have to bring to this party. I need your help. I am insufficient. I'm broken. Help me." And He says, in that circumstance, as we turn to Him on His, what am I trying to say? On His level, according to how He says it works out, then He shows up. And He will demonstrate to us His power. And then, like the psalmist in Psalm 28, verse 7a, again, we will be able to say this: "The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in Him, and He helps me." God will show up in our lives with His power and change us and the way that we do life around us in such a way that it will take us into life like we didn't understand it could be before, and in a way that we could never achieve on our own. That's what we can anticipate as we turn to God, broken at the end of ourselves, and say, "Lord, now, please, would you come and do some math for me?" Today is Communion Sunday, where we recognize Christ's sacrifice on the cross. And as the servers come, Here at the cross and in his resurrection, we find the ultimate reason to trust in God. That he would come and that he would take our place, pay the penalty for our sin by his death. Here at the cross, we see the ultimate demonstration of God's power, where he showed up to accomplish something that we could not accomplish on our own. Not that he would just overcome cancer, not that he would just overcome sickness, but that he would overcome death through his resurrection. Here at the cross, we find our identity. First of all, we find his as God, the Son of God, come to earth to save us. And secondly, our identity now as his children, as we place our faith in him, as sons and daughters of the very Almighty God himself. There's an identity. Take that home. Put it on your door. Here lives a son and daughter of God. Father, this morning, again, we stop and we remember the gift of your Son, sent to us on earth to accomplish what we couldn't, to solve our brokenness through his death and resurrection on the cross. Jesus, we remember your sacrifice today for us, that you would choose to allow your body to be broken and beaten, that you would allow for your blood to be shed so that we would have the forgiveness of sin. Lord, I pray that today, as we remember, that you would also now inspire us and motivate us to engage with you even more, not just for what you've done in the past, but for what you can do for us day by day as we understand our brokenness more clearly, as we understand our need of you more dearly. Thank you for what you've done, for what you're about to do. And I pray these things now in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a really good week as you unpack this a little bit further in your small groups, and we'll look forward to seeing you next Sunday for week 2.